All right, you have arrived at week 6. And it's a good thing too, because we've got something for you tonight. I always say tonight because I'm used to teaching night classes. Day job during the day in animation. Thank goodness we get to turn those computers off. And for my night classes, we get to break out the charcoal, splash around some watercolors, and do some traditional artwork like I'm doing with you guys. So tonight, today, whatever time that you're listening to this and following along, we're going to dig in. We've got something for you today that is going to give a sense of artistry to your studies. So let's start out by looking at this. Speaking of my live classes, I'm currently teaching a brick and mortar head drawing class, just like what I'm doing with you guys. And those of you who aren't local to my area, now we have this opportunity to get together online for this class. But this is a demo I did just a couple of days ago for my live and local class. And so I've opined to you guys a little bit before about have to actually draw and talk at the same time, which is a big challenge. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing for me and for the students because it forces me to actually make my point. If I'm going to do a demo and talk everybody through it and get it done in a very short period of time, so don't bore everybody, then I've got to do exactly the things that we've been talking about in this class. I've got to get a sense of clarity real fast. And so in the demo, I tried to illuminate the things that you and I have been talking about. And so I'm trying as best I can to keep that clear, simple statement. You see this one long line wrapping all the way around the head, so I have that clear, simple egg shape. But then it has lots of overlap. It has this shape, this other shape coming out of it. It's got the cheekbone coming and cutting from behind, coming around in front. And then coming from behind that, it has the jawline coming out, wrapping around in front, and then cutting in front of that, we have the chin coming around in front, wrapping around, and then something else coming around behind it, and something going behind that, and something going behind that, and another thing wrapping around the collar, wrapping around behind that, and you get a tremendous sense of depth with super simple silhouetting, but with simple overlapping shapes. And my value statement, I'm squinting and noticing that my darkest darks are in the deep recesses, here in the eye, under the nose, deep under the chin. That's where my dark darks are. As a matter of fact, let's prove that. Let's do our noise reduction filter to blend out the detail and the texture to really see that. It is so easy to forget and miss that this mass here tends to be darker, for instance, than this mass here, because this is a deep recess, and here, and here. But there's all kinds of light bouncing up into the shadows, into these areas. There's all kinds of, in our classroom we have a heavy bank of overhead lights. And so these open areas here have to be much brighter than the deep recesses that we have happening here. So I squinted, and that's what this is reproducing, is the idea of squinted and seeing how the mass value relationships. And I asked the model to wear this specific costume for a specific reason. Here's what it was. He's wearing this white cravat as part of the Continental Soldier kind of costume. And so that forces me, along with it, by the way, so he's wearing this very dark navy blue jacket. And so that forced me to be very selective and very careful about my value structure. And this is one of the points I want to make to you to make sure that our foundation with value has been laid as we've gone through rendering in the light, rendering the shadow, and putting all of those ideas together. There's a value structure here. The lightest local value is that white shirt. Next is his flesh tone. He has kind of light medium flesh tones. Next is his hair, kind of a salt and pepper kind of a value, but definitely darker than his skin. And then after that is his jacket, which is navy blue. That is a tough value range to get. I've got a stick of charcoal and a beige piece of paper, and I also in this case gave myself the luxury of using a little white chalk. I used some white new pastel for these highlights here. Now, you're welcome to try that, but don't worry, we're specifically going to talk about using chalk for highlights at a later date. I'm already loading up each of these lectures with multiple principles. One thing or two or three things at a time. So we'll get to that, I promise. Okay, so that forehead was really light. I've got to make it really light. But guess what? It cannot be as light as that white shirt. So I have to keep that relationship. Okay? There are direct lights hitting his jacket. But those direct lights were much darker than the light hitting his face. I had to keep that relationship. And then there's all this light coming into the shadow, so I have to get that. But that shadow absolutely cannot be darker than my very darkest halftones. So I have to keep that relationship. And then I have these dark recesses that I've been talking about. And so those have to go darker than what I've put in the other areas of the shadow. Have to keep that relationship. But oh my gosh, I have this nearly black shirt, this jacket here, and the shadows on that go even darker than these deep recesses. I have to have that relationship. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major value masses that have variations within each one of them, and each one of those has to bear the proper relationship to the other ones. You see the challenge of doing this. So that was the point that I made to my class in this demo, and that's the point I'd like to make to you here by showing it to you to firm up that foundation. Now let's prove it. So here's one of my darkest halftones. This is still in the light right here. That's not shadow. That's still in the direct light. So I selected that with my computer tools, my digital paintbrush here. This value here, which is shadow, it's not light. It's feeling like it might be as light as this. I've got to make sure, because the spotlight in this scenario was brighter than any other light source there, and I have to keep that relationship. So I selected it. Let's see how I did. Oh, thank goodness. That value here is that value. And it's pretty clear that as dark as it looks here, it is much brighter than the very lightest part in the shadow. Okay? That's the relationship you have to maintain. But wait a minute. What about this one in here? That is still halftone light. A little bit of light is raking across there. Have I blown it? Is this light here the same value as this here or that there? Well, it sure looks like it. Let's try it out. Let's select that value and lay it down into the lightest areas of my shadow. Well, thank goodness I passed the test. It's my job. I'm the teacher, so close call, but we made it here. And so back to the original. So there's something else going on in this drawing that I did not tell my class about, but I'm going to tell you because you guys are special. Okay, I'm going to give you the jump on this. And that thing is that I'm giving a great deal of consideration, design, and the sensitivity of edges. And now that I've pointed out, I'm sure you noticed before, but now that I've pointed out, I think you can see that I'm really playing up the hard and soft edges. I'm really playing up where I hit a crisp edge and where I have a soft or a lost edge, giving a great deal of consideration to that. So let's make sure as we move into this new principle of edges, let's make sure we have our process nailed down.